Soul of the Cayman people. Thank you for keeping the culture alive.
There's read the news every day. From East End to Georgetown, down into West Bay.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Money Sense is brought to you by the Chamber Pension Plan. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky.
Do you know how well your pension plan performed? Attend the Chamber Pension Plan's annual general meeting to stay informed and find out how you can achieve your desired retirement lifestyle. Members are invited to meet our trustees and take part in our question and answers segment on 1st December 2021 at 6:30 p.m. at the Chamber of Commerce Boardroom in Governors Square. Refreshments will be served. Please visit our website chamberpension.ky or email admin@pensions.ky for further details. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you.
From Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
Good morning. Consumer prices are rising, but is that meaning that inflation is rising as well? Is there a difference between consumer price increases and inflation? You would think not, but there is. And if we can discern the difference between the two, if we can identify this nuance, it'll help us understand where we need to look to be able to solve this problem of consumer price increases. My name is Emil Kalinowski, and I'm broadcasting to you live from the studios of Radio Cayman on 89.9 in Grand Cayman and 93.9 in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Also on YouTube, yes, via Photon, via Light on YouTube, Radio Cayman station and pages. You can find it there, and you can see all of the shows live every single day. You can see whether or not the hosts are actually dressed up. Do they wear ties when they come and broadcast? Do they wear anything below the belt, or is it just a suit and jacket above, but nothing below? Definitely check out the YouTube page for Radio Cayman. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you know, but in the macroeconomic realm, the hottest topic is whether or not the consumer price increases that are being observed around the world will be persistent, and whether they are pervasive, and, very interestingly, whether or not they are inflation. Now, hold on a minute. Isn't a consumer price increase inflation by definition? No, it is not. No, it is not. It's a little bit like the difference between money and currency and dollars. We use them interchangeably, but sometimes it's important to know the specific differences between money, that's the ultimate settlement, gold, silver, a dollar bill, and currency, which is a representation of money, or dollars, which can be all of the above, including electronic accounts. It doesn't even have to be a real tangible good. So there's a difference. And it's the same thing with consumer price increases and inflation. Now, I'll present one side of the argument, and then we'll look at the other side of the argument. And very importantly, I forgot to mention, ladies and gentlemen, today is the 25th of November, and that means we have to wish our American cousins a very happy Thanksgiving. After the break, we are going to go over the top 11 Thanksgiving sides, as voted by you, the broad public. We'll go over it and just have a little bit of fun with that. But okay, let's go back to the macroeconomic realm. So, if you turn on your webpage and you go to your macroeconomic thinker, you'll see that they're discussing consumer price increases. Now, one argument is that these consumer price increases have been caused by money printing, by the governments giving out money, stipends, because of the corona, the virus, the bubonic, the pandemica. And they have been giving out money willy-nilly. They have been doing helicopter money, furloughs in Britain and in Europe, where you don't have to go to work. You could, but you can't because of the shutdowns. And so you're being paid some percentage of your wages via the government. That seems like they're making money out of thin air. And then the central banks, They come out and they have their press conferences and they say, we've decided to print, well, they don't say print, we've decided to create quantitative easing for $5 trillion or 7 or 15 or 100 trillion, I don't know. They make a lot of trillions of something. So it seems as if there's a lot of money being thrown around by our central governments. And therefore, that would be where the inflation comes from. Surely, isn't that it? Yes and no, not exactly. Let us consider that this experience that we're having in 2021 is not the first time that governments have been spending recklessly and giving money away like candy on Halloween or creamed spinach on Thanksgiving. We've had several of these episodes so far in the last 14 years. If you remember, during the Great Financial Crisis, there was a terrible economic event, and what did governments do? In the United States, for example, they gave out checks, free money. They called them tax rebates, if I remember correctly. They didn't have that money, they just gave them out. And then, shortly thereafter, President Obama was elected, and he announced the biggest spending bill we have seen since the Great Depression. In his most recent autobiography, yes, he's had several autobiographies, he announced that he was very proud of the fact that this particular spending bill in 2009 was on par with what Franklin D. Roosevelt did during the Great Depression, the last time that governments went off the reservation, off anything that we have seen before. So we've seen these huge spending splurges before. And you know what we didn't see at that point? We didn't see huge consumer price increases that were persistent and pervasive. And then a few years later, we had a similar event with the election of President Trump. This time, instead of spending, he gave tax cuts out. Tax cuts. He was giving away money. And at the end of his term, he was giving away free checks because of the COVID policies, because, the shutdowns. Did that create a huge boost in consumer prices at that time? No. And this is not just the fiscal arm that I'm referring to. I'm referring to the central banks as well. Don't forget that quantitative easing, which is what they call these programs, which run into the trillions that are being done in Europe and Japan and Britain and New Zealand and Australia and Canada, they have been pursuing these policies for, depending on where you are, 10, 14, 20 years. In Japan, they have been doing quantitative easing since 2000 or 2001, I don't remember, 2000 I believe. And they are infamous for having very low consumer prices. So I would suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that this surge that we've seen in consumer prices is not caused by what the governments are doing. But wait, Emil, you're saying, how can this be? These are the biggest, most wanton spending behaviors we have seen since the pharaohs were building the pyramids. Well, yes, but we've said that every time. We've said that every time when Japan announced something called Abenomics. It was all over the financial media, front page for weeks and months about the gigantic size of it. And there were people writing this, no, I can't sign up for this. This is wanton. This is, well, the last time we've seen something like this was in Weimar, Germany. Surely we'll have hyperinflation. Hyperinflation. We've seen the quote-unquote biggest ever spending by governments and central banks repeatedly over the last 2 decades. Why? Because there's an emergency. They want to boost the economy up, make it function as it used to before the great financial crisis of 2008-2009. Something is very wrong since 2008-2009. The growth rates, while not negative, not always, they're very, very low, ladies and gentlemen, not just in the United States, but in Britain, Canada, and Australia. These are the worst growth rates we've seen in well over a century for this 14-year period. And so they're trying to fix things. And so here comes the coronavirus, and then they go even larger than they've done before. But when did these consumer price surges take place? Did they take place with the first furlough announcements? Did they take place immediately after the announcement of the new medication? Did they take place when the restrictions were removed and the lockdown was eliminated? No, they only started taking place here in 2021 a little bit later into the year, well after these big government policies. So what might it be? There's another possibility, ladies and gentlemen, and that would be a supply and demand imbalance. A supply and demand imbalance. And it's very important to distinguish between a consumer price increase that's brought on by some sort of a shock that is not monetary in nature versus a consumer price increase that is monetary in nature. For example, if the currency is being devalued. In Turkey today, this week, the country of Turkey is experiencing ghastly depreciation of its currency, emergency level, heartbreaking depreciation of its currency. Those poor people with all their savings being inflated away, lost, because the currency is devaluing rapidly against the US dollar right now. That creates inflation because while local goods may still be priced in Turkish lira, but if you need to import anything from abroad, you now need many, many more lira to buy the same good. And so that is a form of inflation, a monetary form of inflation. And that could be persistent and pervasive. Notice how it affects all goods. It doesn't affect just microprocessors that are used in cars. It doesn't affect just oil. It doesn't affect just transportation. The devaluation of the currency is broad and pervasive. And that's the key of a monetary inflation. It's something that you expect either to continue for quite a long time, either because something's happening to your currency or because there's a lot of currency being created. Perhaps yes, exactly what I was just saying. Pretend I didn't say that last part, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thinking about number 10 on our top 11 Thanksgiving sides, which is creamed corn, which we're going to talk about as soon as we get back from the break. But, okay. So, we have these differences between monetary inflation, which is persistent and pervasive and broad, and supply and demand imbalances that are caused by something. Here's a great example, ladies and gentlemen. In the 1970s, the Israelis and the Arabs went to war again, as per usual. And what happened? The United States supported Israel, and the Arab countries said, well, we don't quite like the cut of your jib, and you can go stuff yourself, and why don't we just not sell you the oil? And what happened to the price of oil? Supply shock. And the price of oil went through the roof. Consumer prices went through the roof. But that resolved itself. The economy adjusted in some manner. It wasn't a persistent and pervasive. It was a shock, and it doesn't have to last for just a month or 2 months. It could last for longer than that. And we've seen that in other events. Think of, well, I know no one's listening to this can think of this, but during the Korean War, for example, the government of the United States announced, well, we have to go help South Korea, and that means we are going to go back into rationing goods, price controls, just as we did during the Second World War. And therefore, what you have become used to in these last 5 years, because in 1950 was the war and 1945 was when the last war ended, what you've become used to about getting goods freely and available, well, that's not going to be the case anymore. And so what happened? There was a demand surge for non-economic reasons, and it sent consumer prices skyrocketing. But the economy adjusted in the following year, and it reversed. So these are a couple of examples, that Korean War, where a demand surge because the government comes in with price controls, lockdowns on goods. Or let's look at the Arab-Israeli war and the oil embargo, another transitory supply-demand imbalance. Ladies and gentlemen, after the break, we're going to continue this discussion about the kinds of causes behind consumer price increases, but we're going to start out with a little bit of fun and go over the top 11 Thanksgiving sides.
Do you know how well your pension plan performed? Attend the Chamber Pension Plan's annual general meeting to stay informed and find out how you can achieve your desired retirement lifestyle. Members are invited to meet our trustees and take part in our question and answer segment on 1st December 2021 at 6:30 p.m. at the Chamber of Commerce Boardroom in Governors Square. Refreshments will be served. Please visit our website chamberpension.ky or email admin@pensions.ky for further details. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you.
Money Sense, the only personal finance radio show in the Cayman Islands, hosted by Simon Caudry from the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
This is Money Sense.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Emil Kalinowski, not Simon Caudry. Simon is no doubt in the kitchen right now preparing a glorious Thanksgiving meal. He is not American, he's British, much to his chagrin, but nevertheless, I wonder if we would be able to look in right now, perhaps on our Radio Cayman YouTube page, to look in on Simon Caudry's kitchen. What would we see? Well, we would see him preparing 11 sides for Thanksgiving. And which 11 sides? Well, according to Newsweek, the most popular Thanksgiving side dishes in the United States for Turkey Day are, in reverse order, number 11, creamed spinach. Number 10, creamed corn. Number 9, candied yams, which are not candy and not yams, that's sweet potatoes. Oh, those Americans always with their marketing. Number 8, Brussels sprouts. Number 7, cranberry sauce. This should be much higher, ladies and gentlemen, because the cranberry sauce that Americans suffer comes out of a can. No. Buy a bag of cranberries, put it into a pot, a little bit of water, a little bit of sugar, boil it down, a couple of hours, come back, delicious cranberry sauce. Cranberry sauce should be much higher, but Americans are suffering with canned cranberry sauce. Number 6, sweet potato casserole. That's two placings by sweet potatoes now in the top 11. Number 5, rolls or muffins, scones. Number 4, mashed potatoes. Number 3, green bean casserole. Number 2, macaroni and cheese. And number 1, you know it, stuffing. Ladies and gentlemen, there is one huge oversight in this list, and it's a crime that it didn't make the top 11, and because it's the number 1 side, and that is gravy. Yes. Oh, yes, gravy. That's what Simon's working on right now, making his gravy. Let's get back to our discussion, which is the consumer price increases that we're observing around the world and whether they are caused by monetary behavior, monetary creation by governments and central banks. In the first part, I presented why perhaps it would not be. I suggested it is not because we've seen this level of creation of money by governments, spending by central banks. We've seen it before. It didn't create inflation then in consumer prices, so why should it create it now? Why now? It didn't work the first 10 times, and now all of a sudden it's supposed to work because it's bigger? No, ladies and gentlemen. Each and every time these policies have been announced around the world, they're always announced as bigger, better, unbelievable, the greatest spending of money by governments since the Great Wall was built. It doesn't work. Why? Because we're in a very difficult economic situation, and the private economy is so much bigger than the government is. And if the private economy doesn't want to move along, it's not going to be moving along, no matter what the government's trying to do. So what is causing these supply-demand imbalances? Well, I guess I gave it away. It's the supply-demand imbalances that we've seen before. We've seen it during the Korean War. We've seen it during the oil embargo. What happens is there's an imbalance in some sort of consumer behavior, and that's what causes a surge in prices. And the question is, will it be persistent and pervasive? Likely not, but let's talk a little bit about bottlenecks. Bottlenecks is what we are observing right now, and that is very likely what is the cause of our consumer price increases. that we're seeing around the world. Oh my goodness, I hope you didn't hear that alarm. I always forget to turn that off. Bottlenecks, according to the Bank for International Settlements, BIS Bulletin number 48. What would you rather be reading on Thanksgiving Day than the BIS Bulletin? Bottlenecks, Causes, and Macroeconomic Implications. Ladies and gentlemen, they offer a wonderful review. It's not very long, about which bottlenecks specifically are causing the problems. And they identify that the most severe bottlenecks have taken place in raw materials. Think copper, lumber, and intermediate manufactured goods. Think a semiconductor that's going to be put into a vehicle. And freight transport. That vehicle now needs to be transported to the United States or here to the Cayman Islands. I recently bought a vehicle from Japan Vehicles, if I remember. Anyways, it needs to be transported, and it took forever to get here. That's where the bottlenecks are. And if these bottlenecks are there, what happens? Something called the bullwhip effect. The bullwhip effect is, well, you imagine a bullwhip. If you're watching your Indiana Jones movie, as I'm sure all of us do on Thanksgiving, isn't that a tradition? No, just my house? Very well. The bullwhip. You've got the whip, and you flick your wrist, and there's a little motion there. There's a little bit of an undulation. But as the whip stretches out along the supply chain, along the length of the whip, the undulation is greater. That little ripple at the beginning actually propagates and is larger. Now, at my house, it wasn't called the bullwhip effect. It was called the tamarind switch effect, when Mother was chasing me when I didn't do my chores. Anyhow, moving on. The bullwhip effect in this BIS bulletin, it has been observed in upstream, what are they called? Upstream industries. So, what this BIS bulletin has found is that a problem at the upstream, at the first step of a good, let's say copper, it has to be transformed into wire so that it can be installed in the car. The farther up it is, what they found is that commodities or semiconductors are on average 3.5 to 4.5 the size of the initial impact. Incredible. So we have a little impact in the commodity sector, the semiconductor sector, but by the time it gets to the final good, they have observed this bullwhip effect. 3.5 to 4.5 times the initial impact. Another downstream industry that's considered accommodation industries or transport, right? So you've got the good, now you just need to transport it. Let's say there's a bottleneck there. They have observed that the bullwhip effect there is twice as big as the initial problem. Wow. And of course, different economies have different exposure to the supply chain. So perhaps Germany is very focused on cars, and so that is causing a lot of problems for their economy. Or other economies are more focused on producing commodities, so they have an initial problem, but they don't have to, like I'm thinking of Chile, but they don't have to suffer the bullwhip effect farther on that many other countries have to do. And which country is the furthest on? The United States of America. They are by far the world's biggest consumer. Of course they are. They've got to eat all that green bean casserole, macaroni and cheese, and stuffing. So, no wonder then that we are observing in consumer price increases far and away higher than in any other economic region in the world. They are much higher in the United States. You would think that if this was a monetary phenomenon, that the actions by the governments in Europe, Japan, and the United States, Canada, and Australia Britain, would be similar inflationary effects. But the United States is far and away the highest. Why? They're the final consumer for so much of the world's production. And I believe here, in fact, that the BIS bulletin said that what they have found is that the inflation rates we have been observing this year would actually be lower in the United States by 2.8%. Now, the most recent numbers have been around 5%-ish. They say it would be 2.8% lower if we simply removed energy and motor vehicle prices in the United States. In the euro area, which is not as high on consumer price increases, if we similarly take out energy and motor vehicle prices, the inflation rates that we were observing would be 1.3 percentage points lower. Now you may say, well, what, am I not going to be consuming energy? Or why should we take out motor vehicle prices? I'm raising those points because those two sectors, energy, motor vehicles, are producing an outsized effect, that bullwhip effect, that is juicing consumer price increases. And what does that signal to us? It signals to us that the consumer price increases we are seeing are not persistent and pervasive. They are not broad. They are not broad. They are found in certain sectors. Actually, I misspoke just a moment ago. I said that they're not persistent. You may wonder, well, Emil, this has been going on for, I don't know, let's say a year or so. The BIS bulletin says it is possible that what we're going to observe is that it becomes persistent. And how might this be? They say these consumer price increases are because of supply-demand imbalances. We expect these supply-demand imbalances to resolve themselves because it's an economy. We're not static. Consumers and producers are finding a way to work around the shipping problems. For example, from Brazil, they're shipping food by plane instead of by ship. I believe, if I remember correctly, it was coffee that they were flying to Europe by plane. Can you imagine how much more expensive that is? But they were doing that because it would be less expensive than the traffic-snarled shipping they typically use. So, consumers, producers are looking for a way to resolve these imbalances. But what if they are unable to resolve them? Well, they probably will. But what else might cause these consumer prices to become permanent? Well, if wage price spirals. For example, workers may say, consumer prices are very high right now, and I'm going to go to you, business owner, and I'm going to demand a higher wage so I can keep up with what's happening here. And if you don't pay me, I'm going to go somewhere else and find that. Ladies and gentlemen, that would work in a booming economy. In a booming economy. The owner of the business, seeing the future economic opportunity, she would say, I can afford this because the future is bright. I see demand. I would be surprised if that happens. And workers are likely not going to quit because they see the economy's in poor shape. So I would be very surprised if we saw a wage price spiral. A wage price spiral, ladies and gentlemen. All of which is to say that these consumer price increases, as awful as they are, miserable as they are not being caused by the authorities in our capitals. They're not being caused by the technocrats in our central banks. They're being caused by the COVID restrictions, the supply-demand shocks, and therefore it is very likely that these will be resolving themselves sometime next year and we'll get back to a normal level of inflation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this show. It's been my honor to speak to you all this year. Last time it was on Remembrance Day, and today's on Thanksgiving. The next couple of shows in December, before the year is out, I don't believe I'm scheduled to speak to you. If I do, that'll be a treat for me. But in case I don't, I just wanted to say that I wish you all a wonderful end to this year, wonderful time with the family, and I am grateful on this Thanksgiving Day to have this opportunity to speak to all of you. I'm grateful that there are not that many complaints to the editor about this show, and I hope to see you out in the streets, and feel free to say hello. And well, I'm prattling on. Basically, I just want to express my gratitude and wish you all a wonderful day.
Do you know how well your pension plan performed? Attend the Chamber Pension Plan's annual general meeting to stay informed and find out how you can achieve your desired retirement lifestyle. Members are invited to meet our trustees and take part in our question and answer segment on 1st December 2021 at 6:30 p.m. at the Chamber of Commerce Boardroom in Governors Square. Refreshments will be served. Please visit our website chamberpension.ky or email admin@pensions.ky for further details. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you.
Money Sense is brought to you by the Chamber Pension Plan. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky.